What's going on, everybody? You have Tone here, back with some more Draft League content, and after a bit of a hiatus, my channel is back up and running with a brand new Draft League I've taken part in, the RODL. But before I go any further, I do want to address the obvious elephant in the room, or the lack thereof. And that's basically what happened in my other Draft League in the SDA. So if you guys didn't notice, my last video that went up was the semifinals for the SDA against Aaron. We won that game, we went on to the finals, we played that game, and basically what ended up happening was I had the recording, and it turns out that my recording ended up crashing on itself. So I unfortunately couldn't get the footage from the battle. It was a very, very intense battle between myself and Godoa Dragon. If you haven't seen it, probably if you're subscribed to Godoa, then you've seen it on his side. But basically, long story short, it ended up being a very narrow 1-0 win for Godoa. So unfortunately, that championship that I was hoping to get for the SDA slipped through my fingers, and mostly it's on my own merit of not making specific plays and everything like that. But I can't dwell on the past forever. I made it all the way to the finals in Season 1 of the SDA, which is a pretty big accomplishment as my part, but my quest for the championship does, unfortunately, continue on. And with that, we are now taking part in this new draft, in this new Wi-Fi draft league, the RODL. So basically, it's a standard Wi-Fi draft league, which is a little bit different from previous draft leagues I've done in the past, basically because of how the draft works in terms of points, and because of the fact that this is the very first Wi-Fi draft league I'm doing where you play at level 100 as opposed to level 50, which is what I've basically been accustomed to and how most Wi-Fi leagues have operated for pretty much the beginning, from a Wi-Fi perspective. But in any case, that being said, I'm just going to quickly go over the team I did end up drafting for the RODL. I do feel like I drafted a good, fun bunch of Pokemon with some mixes of Pokemon I've used and Pokemon I have not used in the past. So how the draft works is you get 54 points, which is not a lot, but how the Pokemon are tiered is on a scale from 1 point being the minimum to the most being 10. So every Pokemon is between 1 and 10 points. And you have 54 points, which is a kind of an odd number, but regardless, 54 points to draft between 9 and 11 Pokemon for your team. And granted, this is a very, very iffy pick, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. But just to get right into my team, my first round pick ended up being Celesteela, which is fine. Celesteela is a pretty solid Pokemon overall. That's the good news. The bad news about this pick was I had the first pick overall. And with me saying that, the elephant in the room, the main question comes up: why the hell did you pass on Dragapult? What were you smoking? Answer your question: I don't smoke. The long story is, I've already used Dragapult in the SDA. So my reasoning for not taking Dragapult now, even though I had the first pick, was solely due to the fact of just trying to draft something different. Being the first pick and being stuck into taking Dragapult was pretty much the worst feeling because of the fact that I didn't want to load myself into essentially drafting the same team I used not just a few months prior. So to get myself and break myself out of that mindset, I went with the option of Celesteela over Dragapult. And while many of you may disagree with my decision or my mentality of, well, Dragapult's like the best Pokemon in Draft League format, it doesn't matter what your mentality is, I understand people won't take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but this is just my own way of trying to branch out, try something different. I've used Celesteela in the past, but this is the first time I'm actually using Celesteela in Generation 8. Which is different from Generation 7 with the fact that there's no Z moves or anything like that. And Celesteela still works fine as a good steel flying type. It's good defensively, offensively. Can do a bunch of different stuff. Autotomize, flame charge, even getting access to the power of Meteor Beam. But having the ability to be both defensive and offensive is very, very nice for Celesteela. Steel Flying is still a fantastic typing, being only weak to fire and electric. Being immune to ground is also nice. Being immune to poison, super nice. And it can be very, very annoying with stuff like Leech Seed sets and all that stuff. So yeah, basically, I figured if I was going to stray away from the Dragapult pick for the number 1 pick, I might as well make the most use of having a Pokemon that has a whole lot of versatility. And Celesteela may, while not the best option for being number 1, I figured, hey, try something different, mix things up a bit. So that's my mindset, and I'm sticking with it. And it's 9 points. So I have 45 points left to get at least 8 more Pokemon. So with my next pick, I actually ended up going with one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. Well, not my all-time, but one of my favorite Pokemon to definitely use in Generation 8, and that is a returnee from the SDA, being my Cinderace. Yeah, Cinderace at the very least is coming back onto the squad. But yeah, very, very good Pokemon. Granted, no Liberal, but I never had a problem with using Blaze Cinderace whatsoever. It still functions really, really well as both an offensive and even as a bulky pivot. Like, its bulk may not look that appealing, but it can function very, very well and take specific hits if need be. Plus, having that good speed tier, being able to be faster than base 110s like the Lotties is very, very nice. And more often than not, I don't even need to be running max attack, be offensive Cinderace. I can make this thing bulky. I've used bulky Cinderace multiple times with a fair amount of success, to be perfectly honest, to take specific hits. It's very, very functional. With just being Pyro Ball, can Super Fang bulkier stuff, can give me momentum with U-turn, can taunt walls. Just very, very versatile, very, very functionable. It's just an annoyance. And of course, Core Change is always an option in the back in order to get rid of hazards on my side of the field and shift it onto my opponent. And of course, Pyro Ball is really, really good, unless, of course, that 10% chance to miss Pyro Ball. But nonetheless, that is Cinderace. Very straightforward Pokemon I really love to use in Generation 8. Moving on to round number 3, I ended up going with another favorite of mine that I haven't used yet in Generation 8, and that Pokemon is Swampert. So yeah, the tried and true Pokemon and one of the main accompaniments on TTM Styx' squad is now on my team. And for the most part, I guess Mattoshay as well, but basically only after it got flip turn, although he can disagree with that if he wants. But yeah, Swampert is just really, really nice, having a reliable Stealth Rocker. Water Ground is a fantastic typing, having that electric immunity, only being 4 times weak to grass, which is covered by my first 2 picks, and of course having that slow momentum with flip turn, it's really, really good. Other than that though, not much else to say. Just a very good Stealth Rocker, a really good bulky Pokemon, a really good pivot. Can also function as a potential sweeper or setup mon with bulk up at its disposal over Curse. So yeah, the amount of options at my disposal with Swampert is very, very vast. Can't go wrong with it, and even getting flip turn just to add on to the fact of it being a reliable rocker, doesn't die to any one hit unless it's a grass move, and Rindoberry sets are always very, very clutch to have in those sort of situations, as to ensure I can take those hits, still get up rocks, revenge kill something, and go from there. So yeah, really, really bulky, really, really functional mon, and fits really, really well on my team, especially considering that it also covers for Celesteela's fire and electric weakness very, very nicely. So that is my Swampert. So moving on, my round 4 pick Coming back on the second wheel, we have Diancie. Now, Diancie, not really a round 4 pick, but basically the main reason why I picked Diancie so early was because of the fact that the fairy types were going very, very quick. The main fairy type I wanted for this draft is pretty much one of my favorite fairies, if not my favorite fairy to use, is in Gardevoir, but unfortunately Gardevoir got taken prior to my 4th round pick, and I figured the options for fairy types were dwindling, and there wasn't really much else to like go for in terms of instead of having a fairy type that was super passive in a sense, like Aromatisse or something like that, or maybe even Alcremie. But Diancie felt a lot more beneficial and safer for my team overall, just because of the fact that it's a fairy type. It's also a rock type, so I have that added fire resist. It gives me another stealth rocker to go with my Swampert. And then of course having the fairy typing, so having that dragon immunity is really nice. Granted, this does give me a bit of a weakness to ground. It makes me Diancie 4 times weak to steel, but the first 3 Pokemon on my team all resist steel, so I'm not really worried about steel types against my Diancie whatsoever. Also functions really well as a potential Trick Room setter, Calm Mind Sweeper with Draining Kiss, even Diamond Body, even with Diamond Storm gain defense boost to power up Body Press. It gets Mystical Fire for steel types. So yeah, it's a really functional, really versatile mon overall. It's not limited to just one thing, and I've used Diancie in the past. Really love that Pokemon, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite fairy types to use, and had to snag it up because of the fact that I didn't really feel comfortable using any other fairy type that was available. So yeah, that is the round for Diancie. Maybe a stretch, but at the same time, I figured to be better safe than sorry. And then on the back end of the draft, round number 5, picked up a very solid Pokemon and good pivot in general in Vikavolt. So yeah, Vikavolt is also making its return from the SDA, giving me a bug and electric type. It gives me slow momentum with Volt Switch, a powerful special attacker with base 145 special attack, an option for Sticky Web, and just a very strong bulky offensive pivot in a sense for my team without having to rely so much on Swampert. Vikavolt's weaknesses are covered very nicely by my Swampert, since it does resist rock, it resists fire, all that sort of stuff. And I just really love using Vikavolt in general. It's just one of those Pokemon that feels like if you need something to take a hit, be a pivot, Vikavolt is one of the best Pokemon, and is not affected whatsoever by the fact that Hidden Power is gone and never really needed Hidden Power. And yeah, it's just a really strong, slow, bulky pivot, and it still hits insanely hard even without being fully invested in special attack. And not much else to say other than the fact that it's really good, has a bunch of options at its disposal. And yeah, I really just love using Vikavolt in general, and hopefully I can get some more kills or use it a bit better as opposed to just bringing it solely as a pivot of sorts. But yeah, that is the Vikavolt pick. So moving on, round number 6. And before I actually move on, a few other things to note is the fact that this draft recap is done with post grace period transactions in mind, so I will bring it up. I did make 2 changes to my team after the draft ended, which I will go into when the picks come up. But my round 6 pick, I ended up going with Drapion. Drapion providing my team with a poison type as well as a dark type, a grounded poison, no less, so I have the option to get rid of Toxic Spikes if needed. I have an option in Toxic Spikes myself with Drapion. It gives me a potential Swords Dance Sweeper. It gives me a Psychic Immunity, thanks to it being part dark. And overall, just a very functional mon in general, being able to run either SD, can be Choice Banded, Choice Scarf. and even just be bulky in general with Sugar Berry sets, which is really, really nice considering it only has one weakness to ground. I have Celesteela and a Levitating Vikavolt as ground immunity. Swampert can take ground hits relatively well if invested correctly. But yeah, for the most part, Drapion can function in a multitude of ways. It's not just limited to one particular set in general. And I felt like having the option of having that grounded poison was very, very important for my team, as opposed to just relying on just running heavy duty boots on everything, or running court change on Cinderace to force toxic spikes on my opponent's side, something like that. And it fits really well within the team, especially considering that the previous 3 picks were all relatively slow, and I wanted to start filling out my speed tiers because aside from Cinderace, I didn't really have anything fast. Everything on my team was relatively slow. So I wanted to fill out that speed, start filling out those speed tiers before they start clumping together in the 60s and 50s, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that is the Drapion pick. And moving on to round 7. So my round 7 pick ended up being Frostlass. Now this is one of those transactions that I mentioned earlier where we had 24 hours to do grace period transactions after the draft. This is one of those transactions I ended up making for my team, because originally, instead of Frostlass, this was originally Celebi. But after I saw what was available low in for cheaper, I ended up making this swap of Celebi to Frostlass to accommodate for the Pokemon that I ended up drafting on the team already. So at the end, Celebi ended up becoming expendable, which sucks because I kind of want to use Celebi again. It's been a while since I actually drafted Celebi, but nonetheless, they both Celebi and Frostlass kind of fulfilled the same roles anyway, of having something fast, something in between Drapion and Cinderace. I want to definitely have at least one Pokemon in that speed, in between those speed tiers. Frostlass covers that a bit better than Celebi, being a bit faster. Granted, it's weaker, but it also gives me the opportunity of having both an Ice type and a Ghost type. So I have a normal check as well as a potential Spiker. It's not just limited to being special with Ice Beam and Shadow Ball. It can go physical with Poltergeist, Triple Axle. It can be a very fast Taunter. But yeah, it's just the utility I have with being able to run spikes, being able to be either physical or special. With Frostlass, Curse Body is also a great ability to potentially disable my opponents and moves. But yeah, for the most part, the idea with Frostlass, the Frostlass Celebi pick was to just have something faster than Drapion that was something between Drapion and Cinderace's speed tiers. Frostlass did fit the bill better for my team as opposed to Celebi being a bit faster, although it is a little bit weaker. But that is easily mitigated by the rest of my team and what I ended up picking up later on in the draft. Now, on to the reason why I made the Celebi drop. And that becomes my next Pokemon here, which was the Beheeyem. Now, Beheeyem's not the best Pokemon by any means of the imagination, but once I saw that Beheeyem was only worth 1 point, it was literally cheaper than some NFE Pokemon on the tier list, I couldn't believe that I could have actually gotten a 1 point Beheeyem and still have the Psychic type that I had originally with Celebi. So I figured, pick up Beheeyem, and then after the draft, you drop Celebi, you get Frostlass, whatever else you're missing for your team, because of the fact that you're getting a 1 point Beheeyem. While Beheeyem may not be, like I said, it's not the best Pokemon, it's not the best Psychic type, but it still functions very, very well from a low tier perspective. Granted, it lost the ability to hit Dark types for any real damage outside of Thunderbolt. I think that's its strongest move to go for, especially considering that there is no Signal Beam in the game anymore. but Behem can still function very, very well. Analytic, Psychics coming off base 125 attack. It's going to hurt. And then it can still function as a pretty decent fighting check as well, with access to recovery. It gets nasty plot, it can trick room, can teleport, so I get slow momentum to anything else on my team. So yeah, functions really, really well. It has the quintessential jack of all trades, master of none, wall by dark types sort of scenario, which is kind of what Behem is stuck with in this scenario. But I still like the Behem pick just because of the fact that it was pretty undervalued for 1 point, and I'm really happy that I got it for the most part. Like, I cannot complain one bit about getting a 1 point Behem, as it still functions as a fairly decent psychic type, even though it doesn't really hold up to all the other psychic types that's worth more points. But I felt that Behem was enough to the point where I wasn't really all that concerned, and I felt like I can cover specific dark types fairly well with my draft, so wasn't too worried about making this pick. So with that, we don't have that much points left, but I knew there was one Pokemon left on my tier that I could wait on because of the fact of everybody else that was in the draft not having enough points to actually take this next Mon. But except there was like one coach left, and I didn't want to risk losing it. So I figured snag it up now, round 9, and then fill out the rest of your Mons at the for the last 2 picks. So I did end up going with a full 11 Mon roster, and with my round 9 pick, I ended up snagging up Como, which was one of the Pokemon I was definitely looking at getting towards the end of the draft. Originally, Como wasn't even on my radar for the most part. Because the main Pokemon I was looking at originally for my team was Conkeldurr, but Conkeldurr got taken like round 4, so I had to readjust. I saw Como was available, and even more so with Como is the fact that Clangorous Soul is allowed in this league. So yeah, I have the option of doing Clangorous Soul with Throat Spray, giving my Como a essential Omni Boost for the expense of 1/3 of its HP. It's a sound-based move, so it's boosted. So I can run it alongside with Throat Spray and get a +2, essentially get +2 special attack and start firing off some powerful hits. But it's not just limited to Clangorous Soul. It can be Bulk Up, it can be DD, it can be Iron Defense Body Press. It can function in multitudes of ways, and provides me with another fire resist, an electric check, pairs up extremely well with Celesteela, and I'm really happy that I waited for this Mon, as well as it gives me another Stealth Rocker, so I now have 3 Stealth Rockers on my team with Como, Swampert, and Diancie. So yeah, the fact that I have so much versatility with Como, with Celesteela, with essentially everything on my draft, I'm really, really happy I was able to get a round 9 Como, which is pretty insane to say for the most part. And hopefully I can put in a lot of work, because Como can do a bunch of stuff. It's so versatile to the point where there's no real one set you can prep for on Como, and you prep for one thing, I bring another set, and my opponent's up the creek without a paddle, essentially speaking. So at this point, I only had I believe 4 points left with 2 more Mons, and I knew that one of the Mons I needed to get was a Grass type, because I did drop Celebi for the Frostlass. So I ended up with my Grass type. I ended up snagging up a 1 point Blossom. Now, if anyone remembers me on my channel from a few years back, I did have Blossom before in the past. That was back in 2019 though. I only brought it once, and it was pretty much a game to remember, where the one time it came, it put in work, and it late game swept and knocked out a Deoxys, Speed, and a Thundurus, and I ended up winning that game. Nonetheless though, while Hidden Power is gone, so Blossom's coverage is lessened, it still functions fairly well as a potential Quiver Dance sweeper, especially if my opponent's grass resists are not the best. Plus, on top of that, it does get access to Strength Sap, which is one of the more broken moves in the entire game, having the ability to weaken your opponent's physical attackers while gaining back HP yourself. It's pretty nuts. And for the most part, its coverage is pretty limited, as for the most part, it's stuck with stuff like Moonblast and I want to say Shadow Ball. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's mostly grass coverage for Blossom, but it can still function as a potential Quiver Dance sweeper or bulky Quiver Dance sweeper. And I feel like with the rest of my team, I can cover for pretty much most grass resists, which is basically fire types, steel types, opposing grass types as well. I feel like I can cover them fairly well for Palasa to potentially do something in the late game as a potential Quiver Dance sweeper. Excuse me, words. So yeah, that is the Blossom pick, and then finally, with my remaining 3 points, I ended up picking up my second Pokemon from the grace period, which ended up being Noctowl. So we have Noctowl here. Originally, this Noctowl was a Dracloak, but Dracloak was basically a filler pick because of the fact that I knew once the grace period started, I wanted Noctowl along with Frostlass. And this pretty much completes the fact that everything on my team, I have at least one Pokemon for every single type available in the game. And while I did double up on flying types with Celesteela and Noctowl, the only thing you really need to know about Noctowl is Choice Specs, Tinted Lens, Hurricane. While I may not bring that particular set, it still is very nice to have in the back of your opponent's mind whenever they have to potentially prep for a Noctowl. If I can hit my Hurricanes, that will be good. That's basically all I can ask for out of Noctowl. Can also function as either a nasty plot setter or agility, or even potentially run a double dance set, but I can also function as a bulky defogger if I want to go that route as well. The only thing that was really missing from Noctowl is the fact that it does not get U-turn, but it already got buffed enough between last gen and this gen, so I'm not really that worried about no U-turn on Noctowl. But for the most part, this is the team that I did end up drafting for RODL. Let me know what you guys think of the team down below, and who do you think the MVP of the squad is going to be? Honestly, I cannot wait to actually try this team out. Everything on this team looks extremely fun to use and try out. And yeah, there's not really much else to say about that. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you did enjoy, feel free to leave a like, drop a comment, click that subscribe button. Week 1 should probably be going out within the next day or two, depending on when this goes up. I could probably release it sooner, depending on when this goes up, because it might be a bit late as opposed to the other coaches who are also uploading their side of the battle. Granted, it's not upload required, but I figured I wanted to upload something again just to get some activity back on the channel. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy, and until the next time, this is Tone signing out for now. Peace out.